Hello guys and welcome back to Game of Box Office. Today's prediction will be about the possible box office performance of Resident Evil The Final Chapter. As always, I will start with the points who work in favor for a good box office performance of the movie. First of all, I want to put the attention on the box office history of the whole Resident Evil franchise. Back in 2002, the first Resident Evil was released to quite good reviews and earned a little bit over 3 times the amount that was spent on production. So, even though the Resident Evil movies have a very small budget and therefore also very small grosses, they managed to get a profit every single time. The most successful installments out of the Resident Evil franchise were the last two ones, Resident Evil Afterlife from 2010 and Resident Evil Retribution from 2012. The combined production and marketing budget of around 80 million was spent on each of these installments and both of them grossed well over $200 million. Resident Evil Afterlife from 2010 is still the highest grossing chapter though, since this movie benefited from the 3D hype very much. So with the same writer and director on board in this 6th installment and the box office history of 5 movies behind its back, which all grossed quite some money back, it's highly unlikely for Resident Evil The Final Chapter to not gross some profit back. The next thing I want to name is the release of the new Resident Evil game Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which will be released on the 24th of January next year. That's just 3 days before the cinematic release of Resident Evil The Final Chapter on January 27th, and the movie will definitely benefit from the game release, since this will push the gaming audiences even more into the cinemas. I want to put your attention on the China market. The last Resident Evil was released in 2012, back when the China market was way smaller than today. Now, when Resident Evil The Final Chapter hits cinemas, it can really rise and shine there or be crushed. The franchise is basically an unknown force in China, but when the performance is outstanding there, Sony can hope for a big money rain. Now to the aspects who work not in favor for a good box office performance of the movie. On the second weekend of Resident Evil 6's run, it has to face the horror movie Rings, and on the third weekend of its run, it has to face John Wick Chapter 2 and 50 Shades Darker. I admit, the Resident Evil movies never earn money over the long run. It's basically very unimportant if there's any competition on the next weekends for a Resident Evil movie. But these 3 movies could actually really hurt the performance a bit. I'm not talking about huge losses, but when Resident Evil The Final Chapter is not so good when it comes to the quality of the movie, and Rings and John Wick Chapter 2 are good, I can see Resident Evil 6 to maybe lose about 15 to 20% of its potential gross. Happily for the movie, that's already it when it comes to the things who work not in favor for a good box office performance. As always, I will now fade in all aspects I just counted who work in favor or work not in favor for a good box office performance of Resident Evil The Final Chapter, and I will now start with the pessimistic prediction on the movie. When everything goes just the wrong way with Resident Evil 6, when the quality of the movie is bad, John Wick and Rings hurt the performance, and when on top of that the game is also not selling that good, I can see grosses somewhere in between Resident Evil Extinction and Resident Evil Retribution. In this scenario, Resident Evil The Final Chapter will open with $22 million, and after a multiplier of 2.2, it will finish its domestic performance with a total of $48.4 million. On the overseas front, it will perform a bit better with a total of $150 million, for a combined worldwide total which will just fall short of $200 million. With that, Sony will probably already earn a small amount of money back. I expect the overall cost for the movie to not exceed $90 million, so everything over $180 million worldwide is basically a win for Sony. What happens with the grosses in the realistic scenario? Well, in this scenario, Resident Evil 6 will open with $24 million and after a multiplier of 2.3 will sit on a domestic total of $55.2 million. The second highest domestic gross of the franchise, just behind Resident Evil Afterlife. On the overseas front, it will perform way better because of a slightly improved box office performance in China, and therefore will end up with an overseas total of $200 million. Combined, this would make up for a worldwide total of $255.2 million, also just second to Resident Evil Afterlife and a huge success for Sony. Now, let's move on to the optimistic prediction. When everything works perfectly for the movie, I can see Resident Evil The Final Chapter to outgross Resident Evil Afterlife for the box office crown of the franchise. In this scenario, the movie will open with $30 million, a franchise record. and after a multiplier of 2.2, it will end its domestic performance with a total of $66 million. On the overseas front, due to a now outstanding performance in China and also some good performances in smaller markets, Resident Evil 6 will gross a total of $250 million, which will lead to a worldwide total of $316 million. With that, Resident Evil The Final Chapter would be the first movie out of the franchise to break 30 million on its opening weekend, the first movie to break 250 million on the overseas front, and the first movie to break 300 million worldwide out of the Resident Evil franchise. Sony would be extremely happy with this result, and hopefully they would invest in some more horror zombie movies in the future. The next video will be a prediction on King Arthur or Inferno. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I really hope you liked it. If so, be sure to check out these other 3 predictions that I link you on the left side, right side and bottom of the frame. Also, when you like what I do here on YouTube, be sure to hit a like and subscribe to my channel. See you soon. Bye bye.